My name is Meredith, and I am 27 years old. The night I graduated from Pennsylvania State University with my business degree should have been the proudest moment of my entire life. After years of working double shifts as a waitress while maintaining my grades, I had finally achieved something truly significant. When my parents, Harold and Margaret, offered to host a celebration at our family home, I thought maybe they would finally acknowledge my hard work. The dining room looked beautiful with our finest china and crystal champagne flutes arranged perfectly. But something felt wrong from the moment I walked in. The way my parents kept exchanging secretive glances, how my sister Rose nervously checked her watch every few minutes. Before we dive into what happened that evening, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will completely shock you. What I discovered about my own family that night will leave you questioning everything you think you know about unconditional love. Growing up in our household meant living with rules that never quite made sense to me. My father Harold was 51 years old and worked as a construction engineer for a major firm in downtown Philadelphia. He believed strongly in traditional family values, but somehow those values always seemed to favor my younger sister Rose over me. My mother Margaret, who was 48, managed accounts at a local insurance company with the same meticulous attention to detail she used when orchestrating our family dynamics around Rose's needs and desires. Rose herself was 23 years old and absolutely stunning. She had that natural beauty that made people stop and stare wherever we went. Her blonde hair always fell in perfect waves. Her makeup was flawless, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. Unlike me, Rose had chosen not to pursue higher education after high school. Instead, she worked as a receptionist at an upscale day spa in Center City, a job that our parents praised as perfect for someone with her people skills and natural charm. The pattern of favoritism in our house had been established so early that I barely remembered a time when things were different. When Rose turned 18, she received a brand new Honda Civic as a birthday present, complete with leather seats and a premium sound system. The car was presented to her during a surprise party that our parents had spent weeks planning. When my 18th birthday arrived 6 months later, I received a card containing $50 and advice about getting a part-time job if I wanted transportation. When Rose decided she wanted to take a month-long vacation through Europe with her college friends at age 21, our parents enthusiastically funded the entire trip. They called it her cultural education and spent hours helping her plan itineraries for Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. They even bought her a complete wardrobe of travel clothes and a professional camera to document her adventures. That same year, when I asked for help purchasing required textbooks for my advanced accounting courses, I was told that student loans existed for exactly that purpose, and that I needed to learn financial independence. The disparity extended to our living situations as well. Rose lived in a charming one-bedroom apartment in a trendy neighborhood downtown with rent, utilities, and groceries all covered by our parents. They justified this expense by explaining that Rose needed to experience independence and learn to manage a household. Meanwhile, I shared a cramped studio apartment with 2 other students working 30 hours per week at a local diner just to afford my portion of the rent and basic necessities. Even our wardrobes reflected the difference in treatment. Rose's closet overflowed with designer clothes purchased during regular shopping trips with our mother. Every season brought new outfits, shoes, and accessories that our parents insisted were necessary for her professional image at the spa. My clothes came primarily from clearance racks and thrift stores, supplemented by hand-me-downs that Rose had decided she no longer wanted. But perhaps the most painful aspect of this favoritism was how our achievements were received by our parents. When Rose completed a 6-week certification program for advanced spa treatments, our parents threw her an elaborate graduation party. They invited our entire extended family, ordered a custom cake, and spent the entire evening praising her dedication and professional growth. When I made the dean's list for 3 consecutive semesters while working part-time, the acknowledgement consisted of a brief good job mentioned in passing during dinner. When Rose received a promotion to senior receptionist at the spa, our father took her out for dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in the city. They spent hours discussing her increased responsibilities and the bright future that awaited her in the wellness industry. When I received a partial academic scholarship based on my grades and extracurricular activities, I was warned not to let the recognition go to my head and reminded that pride comes before a fall. Despite all of this systematic inequality, I had persevered through sheer determination and an unwavering belief that education would be my pathway to a better life. I maintained my grade point average while juggling multiple part-time jobs, applied for every scholarship and grant available, and slowly but steadily worked toward my degree in business administration. My plan was straightforward: graduate with the highest honors possible, secure a position at a reputable company, and finally prove that hard work and merit could overcome family politics. The day I walked across that stage to receive my diploma summa cum laude, I experienced a surge of accomplishment that nothing in my previous 27 years had prepared me for. This achievement belonged entirely to me. It could not be diminished, overshadowed, or attributed to anyone else's generosity. I had earned every credit hour passed, every examination, and completed every project through my own efforts and abilities. The morning of my graduation celebration dawned with the kind of crisp spring weather that seemed to promise good things ahead. I arrived at my childhood home early, hoping to help with preparations and perhaps set a positive tone for what I desperately wanted to be a genuine celebration of my achievement. The house looked exactly as it had throughout my childhood, with the same cream-colored walls, the same family photographs arranged on the mantel, and the same sense of underlying tension that had always characterized our family gatherings. My mother Margaret was already busy in the kitchen when I arrived, moving with the efficient precision that characterized everything she did. She had prepared an elaborate spread of appetizers and side dishes, though I noticed immediately that the menu consisted primarily of Rose's favorite foods. There was the spinach and artichoke dip that Rose always requested for special occasions, imported crackers from the specialty store where she liked to shop, and that expensive French cheese that cost more per pound than I typically spent on groceries in a week. When I offered to assist with the cooking or table setting, my mother waved me away with what seemed like irritation rather than appreciation. "You are the guest of honor today," she said without looking up from her elaborate food preparations. "Just go relax in the living room." But her tone carried none of the warmth that usually accompanied such statements. Instead, she sounded like someone checking items off a mandatory duty list rather than someone preparing to celebrate her daughter's major life achievement. My father Harold was in the dining room setting up tables and arranging our finest china and crystal. He had brought out the good dishes that were normally reserved only for major holidays and very special occasions, and I felt a momentary flutter of appreciation for this gesture. However, as I watched him work, I noticed that he was being unusually meticulous about the placement of the champagne flutes. He arranged and rearranged them multiple times, always ensuring that one particular glass sat directly at what would clearly be my designated place at the head of the table. Rose made her typical dramatic entrance around noon wearing a stunning red dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. Her hair had been professionally styled in loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders, and her makeup was applied with the skill of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of looking effortlessly beautiful. As always, her arrival immediately shifted the entire energy of the house, with our parents rushing to greet her and fuss over her appearance. What struck me as unusual, however, was how nervous Rose appeared beneath her polished exterior. Normally, she carried herself with the confident grace of someone who had never doubted her place in the world or her ability to charm everyone around her. Today, though, she seemed agitated and distracted. She kept fidgeting with her jewelry, glancing repeatedly toward our parents, and checking her phone with an urgency that seemed disproportionate to whatever messages she might be receiving. When I attempted to engage Rose in conversation about my upcoming job interviews, particularly the exciting opportunity at Morrison Financial that I had mentioned to the family several times, she quickly steered the discussion toward her own work at the spa. She launched into a detailed story about a celebrity client she had recently assisted, describing the woman's demanding personality and expensive treatment preferences, with the kind of animated enthusiasm that was usually reserved for much more significant events. As the afternoon progressed, our extended family members began arriving for the celebration. Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister, came with her husband Edwin and their son Kent, who was 29, and worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown. Aunt Patricia had always been somewhat more supportive of my academic achievements than my immediate family, often commenting positively on my work ethic and determination to succeed despite the financial challenges I faced. Today, however, even Aunt Patricia seemed distracted and distant. She offered polite congratulations on my graduation, but quickly gravitated toward Rose, engaging her in animated conversation about her work and social life. The same pattern repeated itself with each arriving guest, brief perfunctory acknowledgments of my achievement, followed by much more enthusiastic interest in Rose's activities and future plans. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my father announced that it was time to open the champagne and begin the formal celebration. He had purchased several bottles of what he described as the good stuff, though I noticed he was handling one particular bottle with unusual care and attention. He directed everyone to gather in the living room while he prepared the drinks in the kitchen, taking what seemed like an extraordinarily long time for such a simple task. During this preparation period, I observed Rose checking her phone almost constantly, her face growing noticeably paler with each glance at the screen. When our eyes met across the room, she quickly looked away, her usual confident smile replaced by what appeared to be guilt or anxiety. My mother hovered near the kitchen doorway, occasionally peering in at my father's progress with an intensity that seemed excessive for someone simply waiting for champagne to be poured. The entire atmosphere in the house felt charged with an undercurrent of tension that I could not identify or understand. Everyone was trying too hard to appear normal and celebratory, resulting in conversations that felt forced and unnatural. I began to experience that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach that had accompanied so many family gatherings throughout my life, the uncomfortable sense of being somehow excluded from my own family's inner circle, even when I was supposedly the guest of honor. The moment that would change everything came when I excused myself to retrieve my camera from the kitchen counter. I had left it there earlier while helping to arrange some of the appetizers, and I wanted to take photographs of what I hoped would be a meaningful family celebration. As I walked through the dining room toward the kitchen, I could hear the low murmur of conversation from the living room, mixed with the sound of my father working with bottles and glasses. What I witnessed when I reached the kitchen doorway froze my blood and shattered every remaining illusion I had about my family's love and loyalty. My father Harold stood at the counter with his back partially turned toward me, carefully pouring champagne into our crystal flutes. But it was not the pouring itself that stopped me cold with shock and disbelief. As I watched in horrified fascination, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small white envelope, the kind typically used for powdered medications or supplements. He glanced quickly toward the living room to ensure he was not being observed, then tapped the entire contents of the envelope into one specific champagne glass. It was the glass I had noticed him positioning so carefully at my designated place, setting the one he had arranged and rearranged multiple times throughout the afternoon. After adding the white powder, he stirred the champagne gently with a small spoon, then disposed of both the empty envelope and the spoon in the garbage disposal. He turned the disposal on, briefly grinding away the evidence of what he had just done, then arranged all the glasses on a silver serving tray. The casual efficiency of his movements made it clear that this was not a spontaneous decision or momentary lapse in judgment. This was something that had been planned carefully and rehearsed mentally, if not physically. My own father had just deliberately contaminated my drink with some unknown substance, and he had done it with the methodical precision of someone following a well-thought-out plan. I stepped back quickly, pressing myself against the wall outside the kitchen doorway, my mind reeling as I tried to process the magnitude of what I had just witnessed. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was afraid he would hear it and discover my presence. The betrayal was so enormous and so fundamentally wrong that I struggled to accept the reality of what my own eyes had shown me. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to protect and nurture me unconditionally, and they were actively conspiring to harm me. But my shock and horror deepened exponentially when I heard voices coming from the pantry adjacent to the kitchen. I moved closer to the sound, staying carefully hidden, and listened to a conversation that demolished every remaining trace of trust or love I had ever felt for my family. When she drinks it, she will be sick for at least 2 weeks, my mother's voice was saying in a low, urgent whisper. The doctor said it would cause severe nausea and weakness, but nothing that would be permanently harmful or show up on standard medical tests. Perfect timing, my father replied with satisfaction evident in his voice. She has that interview at Morrison Financial on Tuesday morning. If she is bedridden and vomiting, she will have to cancel, and they will move on to their backup candidates. Then Rose's voice joined the conversation, and the words she spoke felt like a physical blow to my chest. I already submitted my application to Morrison Financial yesterday, just like we discussed. My contact in their human resources department said that if Meredith does not show up for her scheduled interview, I would be their next choice to meet with the hiring manager. I have the same business background from my community college courses, plus my customer service experience from the spa. Rose deserves this position more than her. Anyway, my mother continued with a conviction that made my stomach turn. Meredith has always had every advantage handed to her with those academic scholarships and Dean's List recognitions. She has had more than enough opportunities already. It is time Rose got her fair chance at a real career. Exactly, my father agreed. Meredith is smart and capable. She will find other job opportunities eventually. But Rose has been struggling financially and socially since high school. This position at Morrison Financial could set her up for life, give her the confidence and independence she needs to really succeed. I stood there listening to my family calmly discuss my future as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed for Rose's convenience. The casual way they talked about making me violently ill demonstrated a level of callousness and disregard for my well-being that I would never have believed possible from people who claimed to love me. They had researched the medication, carefully consulting with someone my father described as a veterinary friend who had access to substances that would cause severe gastrointestinal distress without showing up on standard hospital tests or causing permanent organ damage. The timing had been calculated with precision to coincide with my most important job interview. They knew exactly how significant this opportunity at Morrison Financial was to my career prospects, and they had decided that Rose's success mattered more than mine. They had planned this poisoning specifically to sabotage my interview, clearing the path for Rose to swoop in as the backup candidate and claim the position that I had earned through my academic achievements and qualifications. As I continued listening to their matter-of-fact discussion of my deliberate poisoning, I felt something fundamental break inside me, followed immediately by the emergence of something much harder and more determined. The hurt was so profound that it threatened to consume me entirely. But underneath that pain burned a flame of pure, righteous anger that seemed to clarify everything with perfect clarity. They wanted to play games with my future and my health. They wanted to use family loyalty as a weapon against me while plotting my downfall behind my back. Fine. I could play games too, and I had just learned that I was much better at strategic thinking than I had ever realized. Walking back into the living room, I felt as though I was moving through a strange dream where everything looked normal on the surface but was fundamentally altered underneath. My family members were still chatting and laughing, their faces bright with artificial cheer, while I now possessed the dark knowledge of their true intentions. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. These people who were smiling at me and preparing to toast my graduation had just finished planning the most intimate betrayal imaginable. I took my designated seat at the table directly in front of the champagne glass that my father had so carefully prepared with its hidden payload of veterinary medication. Rose sat to my immediate right, her own glass positioned innocently beside mine. She kept stealing glances at me with what I now recognized as a mixture of guilt and anticipation, probably wondering when I would drink and how quickly the poison would begin to take effect. My parents were practically vibrating with nervous energy, barely able to contain their eagerness to see their plan put into motion. My father kept checking his watch and making comments about the champagne losing its perfect temperature, while my mother repeatedly suggested that we should begin the toast before the bubbles dissipated. They were so focused on ensuring that I consumed the contaminated drink that they failed to notice the cold calculation that had replaced the confused hurt in my expression. But as I stared at that glass, knowing exactly what it contained and what it was intended to do to me, a plan began forming with crystal clear precision. It was elegant in its simplicity and absolutely perfect in its poetic justice. They wanted to use a celebration toast as the weapon to destroy my future. I would use that same toast to give them a lesson in consequences that they would never forget. The solution to my dilemma was so simple and so perfectly just that I almost smiled when it occurred to me. All I needed to do was switch the poisoned glass with Rose's clean one, ensuring that she would receive exactly what my parents had intended for me. The irony was absolutely beautiful. Rose would drink the very poison that was meant to eliminate me as her competition, while I would remain healthy and available for my interview at Morrison Financial. The key would be executing the switch without anyone noticing, particularly my parents who were watching me with hawk-like intensity. I needed to create a distraction that would allow me to swap the glasses while appearing completely innocent and unsuspecting. I also needed to ensure that Rose would drink from the contaminated glass without any hesitation or suspicion. "Rose," I said suddenly, interrupting a conversation she was having with Aunt Patricia about some celebrity gossip from the spa. "Would you mind doing me a huge favor and running upstairs to get my camera from my old bedroom? I think I left it on the dresser, and I would really love to get some pictures of this beautiful celebration." Rose looked surprised by the request, glancing toward our parents, with an expression that seemed to be seeking guidance or permission. My mother quickly interjected, speaking with the slightly sharp tone she always used when she thought someone was being inconsiderate toward Rose. "Can you not get it yourself? Dear Rose should not have to run errands during your celebration. She looks so beautiful today, and she should not have to miss any of the fun down here." But I pressed forward, adding exactly the right note of sisterly affection and consideration to my voice. "I am just so comfortable sitting here enjoying everyone's company, and Rose knows exactly where everything is in my old room from all the times she borrowed my things over the years. Besides, she really does look absolutely stunning in that dress, and I do not want her to miss any of the interesting conversation happening down here. It will only take a minute, and then we can all toast together." Rose found herself caught between refusing what seemed like a simple, reasonable request and maintaining the pretense of being a loving, supportive sister on my special day. After a moment of internal struggle that played out clearly across her face, she finally nodded and headed toward the stairs. "Perfect," she said with forced cheerfulness. "I will be right back with your camera so we can capture all these wonderful memories." The moment I heard her footsteps on the second floor, I moved with quick but careful precision. I reached across the small space between our chairs and switched our champagne glasses, placing the one containing veterinary medication in Rose's spot, while moving her clean glass to my place. The entire operation took less than 5 seconds, but my heart was pounding so violently that I was certain everyone in the room could hear it echoing off the walls. I glanced around nervously, but all the adults were engaged in their own conversations and paying no particular attention to my movements. When Rose returned several minutes later, carrying my camera, she automatically resumed her seat without looking closely at the glass in front of her. My parents, meanwhile, were growing increasingly impatient to begin the formal toast, probably eager to get the poisoned champagne into what they believed was my system as quickly as possible. My father Harold finally stood at the head of the table, raising his champagne glass high above his head, with all the ceremonial gravity of someone delivering a momentous speech. His face was beaming with what appeared to be genuine pride and affection, though I now knew that beneath that paternal smile lay the calculated mind of someone who had just attempted to poison his own daughter for another daughter's benefit. "To our brilliant daughter Meredith," he began, his voice carrying that particular tone of forced enthusiasm that had become so familiar to me over the years. "You have worked so incredibly hard to achieve this wonderful milestone, and we could not be more proud of your dedication and perseverance. We know that amazing opportunities are waiting for you in your bright future, and we cannot wait to see all the success that lies ahead." The words felt like bitter mockery given what I now knew about their true intentions. As he spoke eloquently about my bright future, he was simultaneously working to destroy it. As he praised my hard work and dedication, he was preparing to sabotage the very opportunity that represented the culmination of all that effort. The hypocrisy was so breathtaking in its audacity that I had to admire the sheer boldness of it. Everyone around the table raised their glasses in response to his words, smiling and nodding in agreement with his seemingly heartfelt sentiments. Rose lifted her glass as well, though I noticed that her hand trembled slightly as she did so. She still had no idea that she was now holding the glass that had been prepared specifically for me, the one that would soon make her violently ill for the next 2 weeks. But I was not ready to drink yet. This moment called for something more dramatic, something that would make the perfect statement about justice, karma, and the consequences of betraying family trust. I stood slowly, my own glass held firmly in my hand, and looked directly at Rose with what I hoped appeared to be genuine sisterly love and admiration. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet room. Before we drink to my success, I want to say something about the person who really deserves to be celebrated today. Confusion flickered across my parents' faces as they realized this was not part of their carefully planned script. They had expected me to drink immediately after my father's toast, getting the veterinary medication into my system as quickly as possible to ensure maximum effect by Tuesday morning. My father started to sit back down, probably thinking he could redirect the conversation back to its original purpose and timeline. "No, Dad. Please stay standing," I continued, maintaining that warm, affectionate smile that I had perfected over years of family gatherings where I was expected to be gracious, regardless of how I was actually being treated. "I want everyone to hear what I have to say about Rose." I turned to face my sister directly, and for a brief moment, I felt something that might have been genuine regret for what I was about to do. Despite everything that had happened, despite her willing participation in the plot against me, she was still my younger sister. She was still the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms when we were children. But then I remembered her voice in the pantry calmly discussing how she deserved my job interview more than I did, and that moment of weakness evaporated completely. "Rose," I said, my voice filled with what sounded like heartfelt emotion, "you have always been the true heart and soul of this family. You bring such joy and light to everyone around you, and you deserve every wonderful thing that life has to offer. You work so hard at the spa, you are so naturally gifted with people, and honestly, you have talents and qualities that I could never hope to match or duplicate." Rose's face flushed with pleasure at these unexpected compliments, her earlier nervousness replaced by obvious delight at being praised so publicly and enthusiastically. Around the table, I could see other family members nodding in agreement, probably thinking this was exactly the kind of generous, gracious behavior they had always expected from me as the older sister. So instead of drinking to my boring old graduation, I continued, raising my glass even higher. "Let us toast to Rose instead. She is the one who truly deserves to be celebrated today. She is the one who should have all the best opportunities coming her way. She is the one who deserves to have everything work out perfectly in her favor." With those words, I reached across and gently took the poisoned champagne glass from Rose's surprised hand, simultaneously offering her my own clean glass in exchange. "Here, Rose," I said, with what appeared to be genuine sisterly generosity. "You should have the very best champagne. You have earned it more than anyone else here today." Rose's eyes widened with surprise and what looked like genuine emotion at this unexpected gesture. "Meredith, that is so incredibly sweet of you, but today is supposed to be your special day," she protested, though she accepted the glass I was pressing into her hands. "I absolutely insist," I replied firmly, making sure the contaminated glass was now securely in her possession, while I held the clean one safely in mine. Today should be about celebrating the person who truly deserves recognition. Drink up, sister dear. You deserve every single drop of this special champagne." The next 30 minutes unfolded like a perfectly choreographed ballet of justice and consequences. Rose, genuinely moved by what she interpreted as my selfless generosity, drank deeply and enthusiastically from the glass I had given her. She even commented on how delicious the champagne tasted, mentioning that it seemed to have a slightly different flavor profile that was more complex and interesting than usual. If only she had known that the complexity came from the veterinary medication that my father had so carefully dissolved into it. My parents watched this exchange with growing horror and panic, finally understanding what had just happened, but completely powerless to stop it without revealing their entire conspiracy. I could see the fear building in their eyes as they realized that Rose was consuming the poison that had been intended for me. My father's face had turned completely white while my mother gripped her own glass so tightly that her knuckles were bloodless, and I genuinely thought the crystal might shatter in her hands. I meanwhile drank calmly and slowly from the clean glass, savoring not just the excellent champagne, but the exquisite poetic justice of the moment. Every sip I took was a small victory, concrete proof that their carefully laid plans had not only failed, but had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. I made sure to maintain my gracious, loving smile throughout the toast, playing the role of the generous older sister to absolute perfection. The conversation around the table continued normally for the next 25 minutes, with various family members sharing fond memories and offering congratulations on my graduation. But I kept one eye on Rose, constantly waiting and watching for the first signs that the veterinary medication was beginning to take effect in her system. According to what I had overheard in the pantry, the symptoms would begin manifesting relatively quickly after consumption. About 25 minutes after Rose had finished her glass, she began shifting uncomfortably in her chair, pressing one hand against her stomach with a puzzled and slightly concerned expression. "I feel a little strange," she said quietly, probably not wanting to create a disturbance during what was supposed to be my celebration. "My stomach feels really cramped and unsettled." Strange how my mother asked with barely concealed anxiety, her voice tight with the knowledge of exactly what was happening and why. "Just queasy, I guess," Rose replied, attempting to maintain her composure. "Maybe I ate too much during the afternoon, or perhaps something disagreed with me. The cramps are getting stronger, though." Within just a few more minutes, Rose's condition deteriorated rapidly and dramatically. Her face went from flushed to pale to an alarming shade of green that made several guests exchange worried glances. She doubled over in her chair, both hands clutched to her midsection, breathing heavily through obvious waves of intense nausea that were clearly beyond anything she had ever experienced before. "I think I'm going to be sick," Rose gasped, stumbling to her feet and rushing toward the bathroom with the desperate urgency of someone who knew they had only seconds to spare. The sound of violent, wrenching vomiting echoed through the house for the next several minutes, causing our guests to exchange increasingly worried glances and whispered concerns. My father immediately jumped to his feet, ostensibly to check on Rose's condition, but I could see the pure panic in his movements and expressions. Both he and my mother were now trapped in their own web of lies and deception, completely unable to call for proper medical assistance without risking exposure of what they had actually done. Rose emerged from the bathroom after what felt like an eternity, her face completely ashen and her carefully styled hair disheveled and damp with perspiration. She was leaning heavily against the doorframe for support, clearly struggling to remain upright under the assault of symptoms that were overwhelming her system. "Something is really wrong with me," she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have never felt this sick before in my entire life. The cramps are getting worse by the minute, and I cannot stop feeling like I'm going to vomit again any second." "Maybe we should take you to the emergency room," Aunt Patricia suggested with genuine concern and alarm. "This does not look like normal food poisoning or a simple stomach bug. You need to be seen by a doctor immediately." "No," my mother said with sharp intensity, then quickly tried to cover her suspicious reaction. "I mean, it is probably just something she ate earlier today. You know how those fancy spa lunches can be with all their exotic ingredients? Rich food sometimes causes these kinds of reactions. We should take her home and let her rest in her own bed," my father added, moving to Rose's side to provide physical support. "She will probably feel much better after a good night's sleep in familiar surroundings." But Rose was deteriorating rapidly before our eyes. The veterinary medication was clearly potent and fast-acting, designed to completely incapacitate its victim. She was doubled over with abdominal cramps, sweating profusely despite the comfortable temperature, and could barely stand without assistance. Tears were streaming down her face as wave after wave of nausea and pain hit her system. "This is not normal food poisoning," she whimpered through her obvious agony. "Please, I really think I need to go to the hospital. Something is seriously wrong, and I'm scared about what is happening to me." The desperation in my parents' faces would have been almost comical if the situation had not been so serious. They had created this nightmare scenario, but now they were completely trapped by the consequences of their own actions. Taking Rose to the emergency room would mean medical tests, detailed questions about everything she had consumed, and potentially the discovery of veterinary medication in her bloodstream. They simply could not risk that kind of exposure and investigation. As I watched my sister suffering from the exact poison that had been carefully prepared for me, I felt a cold, satisfied peace settle deep into my bones. This was precisely what they had planned to do to me. This was exactly how they had intended for me to feel on Tuesday morning when I was supposed to be preparing for the most important job interview of my life. The only difference was that Rose was now receiving their intended gift instead of me. "Karma truly is a beautiful thing," I said quietly, just loud enough for my parents to hear, but not so loud that the other guests would catch my words or understand their significance. After our confused and concerned guests had finally departed after Rose had been taken home by our parents, who continued to insist that it was merely a severe stomach bug that would resolve itself with rest and time, I found myself alone with Harold and Margaret in the very kitchen where this entire nightmare had originally begun. The house felt different now, charged with the electricity of truths that could no longer be hidden or denied. My parents stood on the opposite side of the kitchen island from me, both looking utterly haggard and defeated. The carefully constructed facade of loving, supportive parents that they had maintained throughout the evening had finally crumbled completely, leaving behind two people who had been caught in their own elaborate trap. "I saw you put something in my glass, Harold," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the heavy silence that had settled over the kitchen like a suffocating blanket. My father's face cycled through several different colors before settling on an unhealthy grayish-white. He opened his mouth as if to deny the accusation, then seemed to realize the complete futility of attempting to lie at this point. My mother sank heavily into one of the kitchen chairs, her hands shaking visibly as she covered her face in what appeared to be shame or despair. "How long have you known about our plan?" he asked finally, his voice barely audible above a whisper. "Long enough to make sure that Rose received exactly what you had so carefully prepared for me," I replied with icy precision. "I heard your entire planning session in the pantry earlier. Every single disgusting detail. The veterinary medication, the timing with my Morrison financial interview, Rose's backup application that she had already submitted. All of it." Margaret looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, her makeup smeared and her expression desperate. "We never intended for Rose to get hurt like this," she said frantically. "This was never supposed to happen to her. She was not supposed to be the one who suffered. But it was perfectly acceptable for it to happen to me," I asked, allowing my voice to rise slightly with controlled anger. "Your own daughter, who worked her ass off for 4 years to graduate with honors, who has a legitimate opportunity at a career that could change her entire life. That daughter was perfectly acceptable. Collateral damage for Rose's benefit. Rose has been struggling so much since high school." My mother continued desperately, as if that could somehow justify their actions. "She cannot compete with your academic achievements or your natural intelligence. She needed this opportunity at Morrison Financial more than you do because she does not have as many options available to her. She needed it more," I repeated with incredulous disbelief. "Or you simply decided that she deserved it more than me. Just like you decided she deserved the new car, the European vacation, the downtown apartment, and the constant support and encouragement while I worked multiple jobs just to survive and pay for my own education." Harold finally found his voice again, though it emerged weak and defensive. "We genuinely believed that Morrison Financial only had one entry-level position available in their current hiring cycle. We knew that you would eventually get other opportunities because you are so smart and capable and determined. Rose simply does not have as many natural advantages or options available to her. So your solution was to poison me to level the playing field. I shot back with laser-focused intensity. You obtained veterinary medication that was specifically designed to make me violently ill for weeks. You timed it perfectly to coincide with the most important job interview of my entire life. And you somehow think that represents reasonable parenting. We researched it very carefully, my mother said weakly, as if thoroughness could somehow make attempted poisoning more acceptable. The medication would not cause any permanent physical damage, just enough illness to make you miss one single interview. We thought that maybe if Rose could get this job and build some confidence and financial independence, it would change her whole life trajectory. At the cost of deliberately destroying mine, I stated flatly. At the cost of betraying your own child in the most fundamental way possible. Do you have any comprehension of how deeply sick and twisted this entire plan was? 3 months have passed since that terrible night, and I am happy to report that my life has been completely transformed in ways I never could have imagined when I was living under the shadow of my family's dysfunction and favoritism. The interview at Morrison Financial went better than I had dared to hope, and I was offered a position as a junior financial analyst with a starting salary that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Rose made a complete physical recovery from the poisoning, though it took exactly 2 weeks, just as my parents had calculated. She was far too ill to attend her backup interview at Morrison Financial, which meant that the position ultimately went to me after they were impressed by my qualifications and interview performance. In the most ironic twist possible, my parents' sabotage plan actually eliminated my primary competition and worked entirely in my favor. I have kept my promise about cutting all contact with my parents. Over these past 3 months, they have called my phone countless times, sent endless text messages, and even appeared at my apartment building once before being turned away by security. I have blocked their numbers, returned their letters unopened, and made it crystal clear that they no longer have any place in my life. The most liberating aspect of this complete separation has been discovering how much mental and emotional energy I had been wasting on seeking approval that was never going to be freely given. Without the constant drain of trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it, I have found myself more confident, more focused, and genuinely happier than I can remember being since childhood. My new career has exceeded every expectation I had. My colleagues treat me with respect and genuine appreciation for my skills and contributions. My supervisor has already mentioned potential advancement opportunities, and I have been invited to work on several high-profile projects that will significantly enhance my professional development and reputation. Through therapy, I have come to understand that what my parents did was not just wrong in that specific moment, but represented the culmination of a lifetime pattern of emotional abuse disguised as normal family dynamics. Healthy families do not operate with systematic favoritism. Healthy families do not plot to harm one child for another child's benefit. Most importantly, healthy families provide unconditional love that does not have to be earned through perfect compliance or self-sacrifice. Sometimes people ask me whether I think my response was too extreme, whether I should consider giving my parents another chance to make amends and rebuild our relationship. My answer is always the same. They had 27 years to treat me with basic fairness and respect, and instead they chose to poison me when my success threatened their preferred family narrative. Trust once shattered so completely and fundamentally cannot be rebuilt through apologies or promises of future good behavior. The fact that they were capable of planning and executing such an intimate betrayal means they would be capable of doing it again whenever they decided their interests, or Rose's interests, did not align with mine. I refuse to spend my life walking on eggshells around people who have already proven they will harm me for someone else's benefit. Today I am successful, independent, and surrounded by people who celebrate my achievements instead of sabotaging them. I have genuine financial security for the first time in my adult life, a career with real growth potential, and most importantly, the peace of mind that comes from knowing I am valued for who I am, rather than tolerated as long as I stay in my assigned role. The champagne toast that was meant to be my downfall became the catalyst for my liberation and success. Sometimes the people who should love you most are indeed capable of hurting you most deeply, but their betrayal can also reveal inner strengths you never knew you possessed. I learned that my worth is not determined by their recognition or approval, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who refuse to treat you with basic human decency and respect. Have you ever dealt with toxic family favoritism or had to make the difficult choice to cut contact with family members who repeatedly betrayed your trust? What would you have done if you discovered your own parents trying to sabotage your biggest opportunity? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction and toxic relationships. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they are not alone in dealing with family betrayal and that they deserve so much better than conditional love. Thank you for listening to my story with such patience and attention. I hope it reminds you that your worth is not defined by how others treat you, and that sometimes choosing yourself is the bravest and most necessary thing you can do.